Hi there, welcome. Welcome to Homekeepers. Come right on in, my friends. So good to be with you today, and thank you, for connecting with us so often. We really appreciate you, and boy, don't we have a lot in common. We like to talk about our children, our grandchildren, and what the Lord's doing, and the hard things we're going through at the time. It's wonderful to be a part, as the Gaithers say, a part of the family of God, and that's the way we think of you. Well, this is the third day with Dr. Grady McMurtry, and we're talking about creationism, which is so important to the Christian walk, and I fear it's not being taught. It's certainly not taught in the schools. And remember, Dr. McMurtry goes to Russia. I think he's been there 50-some times to teach where they've never heard anything except evolution. And so it's very important to the Christian walk, and it's been proven to be true over and over and over through all these centuries. So it's good for us to revisit it. And I want to talk about our recipes. First of all, I want to carry over from yesterday where we made these pizza balls, and they flattened out kind of like pancakes. And so we revamped the recipe since then, and I feel we've come up with more of a success story. Thankful to Wanda and Susan for figuring out how to make it better. So if you order that recipe, we'll send you the good one. And today we're going to fix taco spaghetti. Now, isn't that combining two of the most favorite flavors in all of America? And we can't boast in any of them because there's a combination of Mexican and Italian, but we'll see how it goes. And you can always get our recipes for free. Let me again offer you Creation, Our Worldview. As I go through this, I was going through it, it's so thorough, and I think it's so important. These are things that you can read and teach your grandchildren. And so for that gift of at least $25, we'll get it to you. I think one of the most important books we've ever offered. I just feel an urgency and a passion about the fact that I don't know how much creationism is being taught in our churches, friends. So this is something you can get and really learn a lot for only $25. Be well worth it. Change your whole viewpoint of God. I'm just absolutely sure of that. So 1-800-229-0059 if you use that credit card, or you write to me. Love getting your notes, and Wanda goes through them too. Box 6922, Clearwater, Florida 33758. And you could testify, Wanda, some of the nice things.
Oh.
That they'll order a recipe or something,
Yeah.
and they'll put in the sweetest note that really makes us feel like we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, we have the best viewers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're doing a taco spaghetti, and we did it a little bit differently because we cooked the pasta ahead of time. Obviously, for TV purposes, we have to do it that way. For us, because we only have so much time. But I'll send you the regular way, and if you choose to do your pasta separate, that's fine. You're not going to hurt anything. All right, so we took a pound of ground beef, ground it up. I did a little bit in advance. Actually, Susan did it for me, but God bless
Did you
her.
ever do anything like this for your boys? Combine the Italian and the Mexican?
No, can't say that I have.
Well, we're going to see what it tastes like.
Yeah, so we're just going to stir this in. And my mom always said, whenever you cook anything, you have to make sure you flavor your meat really well, especially like with chili. If you do it the old-fashioned way, you ground your ground beef, you add your seasonings, but you must really, because it's hard to go back in and re-season everything to the flavor you really want if your meat isn't flavored really well.
And I'm not good at that. After I taste something and it's finished, I realized I never did put enough salt in it.
Yeah. All right, well, but some of your packaged things, and like your cheese and whatever, has salt in it.
It's got plenty.
You kind of want to do that to taste. Okay, now this is a can of the Rotel.
And it's
this
got
has
chilies in it.
Which I love.
Oh, you like hot stuff?
I don't know. My old age, I like it.
My husband could take
So we're gonna
you
let
can almost see smoke coming out of his nose, but.
Well, I don't take it that hot, but and this is some tomato
paste.
How much is that in there? A tablespoon of tomato paste.
And I've cut up some fresh cilantro, 2 tablespoons.
Yeah. So we're just going to kind of work this in a little bit.
Well, I've never met a person that doesn't like spaghetti.
Let me tell you, I love spaghetti.
And I'm anxious to taste this with the taco seasoning.
And this is a Roma tomato cut up, one. So you just want these little things to marry a little bit. And
okay,
then,
and do you go ahead and put the cheeses in it?
yeah, you can hand me
Want
the
to put this on
pasta.
first?
Yeah, why not? Because we're gonna get that warmed up a little
And
bit.
we might have cooked up too much pasta.
So I'm going to start with this, and I can add. You can always add more in. Just see how it's going to go here. You're getting all ready here.
Yeah, because you want. Oh, that's looking good.
Yeah.
You don't want to overpower all that good flavor, but it looks like you could use a little bit more pasta.
Yeah, we can use more pasta in here. If you want to throw more in, you can. And the thing is that we do want it to be somewhat heated before you dry it. All right, that's great. And then we're gonna.
Does the cilantro go on top, or do you put it in there?
Well,
it's very flavorful.
I think you probably can do a little bit, but in the pasta if you want to. But I would save some for the outside.
Yeah, it is so flavorful.
And that's, by the way, should be the last thing you add in is some of your cilantro or stuff like that, because parsley the same way.
When we talk about creation,
Oh,
the
yeah.
detail, think of the herbs that God made
For us.
that makes everything so tasty.
Yep.
So, well, do you want to pull just a little bit out of that? And
Well, honey, I need a fork, so I don't think this is going to come out too well with what I'm doing here. So
I'll hold the.
I hope that this is, this fork really tosses it
One
much
of my
better.
favorite restaurants, the chef has a little
Ready?
garden box.
And if you want to, throw a little bit of cilantro on top of that
Yeah.
as you're consuming it.
He's growing herbs right there by his stove.
Who does that?
It's a chef at Cafe Pont.
Oh, I've never been there. I got to go there, I guess.
Oh, that's my favorite. Okay, you heard
All
me
right.
say that.
Yep. I heard you say
We
it.
should get paid.
Good?
Very
you like
good.
it? Awesome. That's wonderful. You can have this recipe.
My mouth's full. If
Awesome.
you are looking for a new way to do spaghetti, that's it. All right. You can get your recipe, and then my guest will be back, Dr. McMurtry. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy.
If you would like a copy of today's recipe, you may receive it by contacting us through social media as listed on the screen. When requesting a copy through the mail, be sure to include a self-addressed stamped envelope. Thank you, and please know we always appreciate hearing from our viewers.
Okay, I'm so glad that we've still got Dr. McMurtry with us, and as I told you on the last program, we've been talking about climate change and global warming, and because he's an absolute expert on creationism and evolution, and how does this maybe fit into evolution. And so I promised you on the last one that I would read a list of things that former Vice President Al Gore put in his book called An Inconvenient Truth, I believe in 1970. And here are some of them: that civilization would end between 13 and 15 years. There would be between 1 and 2 million starvations every 10 years. A new ice age in the year 2000. So we've dodged that. Rising sea levels, increased tornadoes, which have actually declined, according to the material that I had. Massive floods in China and India. I haven't heard of it. Here's the one that really got me: the polar bear extinction.
Correct.
And we've all seen pictures of all these little polar bears just having a great time.
The fact of the matter is, polar bear populations were increasing.
Yes, they're increasing.
At the time that he said they were becoming extinct, and have roughly doubled since the time that he made that prediction. The fact of the matter is, I remember distinctly in his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, which was mislabeled. It should be An Inconvenient Lie. There isn't a truth in the whole movie except his name. He was talking about polar bears on ice floes drifting off over the horizon and drowning.
Yeah.
But if you look at the movie carefully, you notice he didn't show a real polar bear. He showed an animated polar bear because he couldn't find a real polar bear that was doing it. And in my presentations I do on how global warming, global cooling, climate change is not at all having anything to do with humans, I actually have a statement by a polar bear expert in the Canadian government who said, a polar bear can swim 100 miles, especially a fat one. The fact of the matter is, polar bears don't get on ice floes and float out and drown. They can swim literally 100 miles without getting on a piece of ice.
I've seen
you know,
video of them swimming.
The fact of the matter is that polar bear populations right now are exploding. They shouldn't be on the endangered species list. That was something that happened under a liberal head of the U.S. government. They are expanding to the point now that polar bears are going into areas which were not normally polar bear areas, and they're actually fighting with grizzlies over territory. They are also intermixing. We now have hybrids of grizzlies and polar bears because they will mate. After all, they're bears. And they don't know the difference. They're just bears. It's like dogs, you know. You let your poodle go down the street, she doesn't look for another poodle, she looks for a dog. Yeah. So, you know, the whole thing is pure hysteria.
You know, also the unbridled hypocrisy of these people, and a lot of Hollywood elites, and they live in great big houses behind walls. They don't want America to have any walls, but, and you know, they have jets and they have several cars and all this, but they're very good at pontificating about climate change. Now, when you were teaching evolution, and if you've not seen my guest before, before he was a Christian, he taught evolution from junior high all the way into college, and probably knows it as well as anyone. So if this had become something popular and everybody talking about when you were teaching this, how would you have tied it into evolution?
Well, as a good scientist, I would have, of course, wanted to do the research to see whether it was true or not, because I can tell you from a knowledge of science history that, again, there have been people saying that it was going to cool, going to heat, that the world was going to end. In 76, we were headed into the next ice age, when actually at that time it was starting to warm. In 1912, when the Titanic sank, there were these, again, what I call evolutionary terrorists, and that's what they are. They're evolutionary terrorists based in evolutionary thinking, who thought that that sinking of the Titanic was an event leading us into the next ice age. You have to remember, we came out of the little ice age, as it is referred to, in 1895, and the Titanic sank in 1912. Well, it's not that long. You know, that's only 17 years that we'd had a little warming, and yet the hitting of the iceberg was said to be a symptom of us going right back into another ice age.
Because it was an iceberg?
Because they hit an iceberg. You know,
I mean, I'm not real brilliant, but that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and they hit the iceberg for a couple of different reasons. It had nothing to do with heating or cooling of the earth, you know.
Might have been in the wrong place.
Well, they were traveling too fast in the calm sea. They didn't see it until they hit it. But the fact of the matter is, that was just human ego. That's all that was.
But as you were teaching, would you have, after doing a little research, would you have just gone with this, and this is just continues and proves
I would have
point?
at least looked at the history. And when we look at the history, and we have sunspot activity back to Galileo. He's the one who discovered sunspots with his first telescopes. We take a look at historical records. We know that the Earth has been significantly hotter in the past and significantly colder. The Little Ice Age lasted from about 1250 to 1895. If you know anything about American history, think about George Washington. He took the Continental Army into winter headquarters at Valley Forge. They were absolutely freezing to death. They were walking in blood without shoes. When they attacked the Hessians, when they crossed the Delaware River, they had to avoid the icebergs on the Delaware River to attack Trenton, New Jersey. Well, when was the last time there was an iceberg on the Delaware River? You know, back in the early 1800s, at just about the same time, just right after the American Revolution, they were having frost fairs in London, England, where the Thames would freeze over. They would put up kiosks, sell hot crust buns where people were skating on the ice. When was the last time the Thames froze over? So it is warmer now, but it has been warmer than now in the past. And so as a good scientist, you would say, wait a minute, people didn't cause this. The three previous warm periods I had mentioned the other day, about the medieval warm period, the Roman warm period, the Minoan warm period. This is before the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s. Now, God is a God who tells us that we are personally responsible for resources, that we should not pollute for the sake of polluting. But we should be good Christian conservationists. And the difference is conservationists use the resources wisely, whereas environmental terrorists are preservationists.
Yes, and America is the best at all of it, and America is the one that I believe is being targeted. Now, this is really pushed by the UN. Do you see it as kind of maybe almost a religion?
Well, again, I said that evolution is a religion.
Right.
And this global warming, global cooling, climate change being able to be controlled by humans is a part of the evolutionary religion. I have a chapter in my own book where I talk about all of these issues starting with good stewardship. But then I document all the scientific information up to the present, dealing with the fact that humans are not responsible for the Earth as a whole warming or cooling. And the fact of the matter is, and I'll put it this way, we ought to be burning all the carbon we could find if it were for a useful purpose. Now, I do stress for a useful purpose. Because when people like Al Gore say that because of humans causing the earth to warm up and therefore supposedly causing deserts, and we're going to kill people, it's actually the exact opposite. Think about it. Because of environmental terrorist laws, for instance, in Norway, they are having to sequester carbon dioxide and putting it into old wells to cap it. We ought to uncap and release it. Because what do plants use to make food? Carbon dioxide. What do trees use to make wood? Carbon dioxide. Number one, the plants would absorb it. Number two, it isn't a gas that warms the atmosphere. It is not a greenhouse gas that's detrimental. Most of the heat in the atmosphere is actually trapped by water vapor. 70% of the heat trapped in the atmosphere is from water vapor. Now, when was water vapor a dangerous gas?
Yeah, I think that it's all political, and it's
utterly
leading
political
to America paying for everything.
Well, that's just it. When you take a look at for instance, the recent conference that they just had was an absolute debacle. Because the small nation said, oh, we're suffering the most because we're small and you need to pay for it. The big countries said, we're not going to pay for you. And who are the two countries that pollute the most? India and China. And under things like the Kyoto Accords and under the Paris Accords, which fortunately we never adopted, what happened? China and India were exempt because they were supposedly developing economies.
Right.
Now the two have the two largest populations on Earth. How can you call them developing countries? You know, China has roughly 10 times the population. Well, I shouldn't say 10 times. They have 5 times the population of the United States. And India has a larger population than China.
And neither of them are really hurting.
And they are all burning cheap, low-grade, high-sulfur coals. During the Olympics in Beijing, they had to take 50% of the cars and trucks off the highway every day to try to keep the smog down, and they still had smog, and there were athletes that wouldn't even compete.
Yeah, you see people with masks on.
All the time. But the same thing is happening in, of course, China. It's happening in India. We see it in things like Mumbai. Smog has become a serious problem, worse than it was in L.A. when I was growing up as a child in California. It's because they're burning these high-sulfur coals, and they're not putting any kind of equipment on them to even begin to scrub them.
Well, as such an experienced teacher, both evolution and creationism, I would say that he was not a Christian when he taught evolution.
True.
And you see where all this is going. It's really, as you said, you know, climate change probably fits right into that evolutionary pattern. So, and where it's all going, it's just another religion. There are people making a religion out of climate change.
Evolution is the religion. And then you have, just like denominations.
Okay, so the climate change is one denomination.
And the environmental terrorists are a denomination within the greater religion of evolution.
Well, that kind of explains it. And when this is passed and used, they'll probably come up with something else to kind of undergird a very false premise.
Well, because it's failing. You notice how they've changed terminology.
Yes.
We're going to prevent global warming.
Yes.
But nobody bought it. And the fact of the matter is, in the last 20 years, it's been cooling. It's a little hard to tell somebody in International Falls that global warming is the problem when they're freezing to death.
The falls are frozen.
You know, and well, again, anybody in a northern or deep southern environment knows the Earth has been getting colder. Canadians know it's getting colder. Across the entire northern tier of the United States, everybody knows it's getting colder. So they don't buy the global warming thing. So they said, oh, then, well, what we're going to do is we're going to prevent climate change.
Climate change.
Now, my first question is, okay, if we could, which we can't, but if we could, whose climate are we going to adapt? You know, which one are we going to adopt to be the one we want? I don't want the Siberian climate. I go to Siberia once, twice every winter. Believe me, in southern Siberia in February, it's minus 40, and that's a warm day. I don't want that in Florida. I don't want it in New York either. But the fact of the matter is, it's absolutely ludicrous. People cannot control the climate. They can't control the weather. And these prognosticators, you know, who say, oh, well, 10 years from now, such and such. Look, if you can actually tell me the rain 2 Thursdays from now, then I might start to believe you could predict weather out for 50 years. But they can't. There are too many variables. There's no computer program, no supercomputer in the world that can process all the variables to give you an absolutely accurate weather forecast. Now, we get pretty good. And of course, as you know, here in Florida with hurricanes, number one, the earth is cooling. We have less hurricanes. This year, we, as far as the states are concerned, barely touched.
Praise God that Tampa Bay's been spared.
Again.
Well, in the time we have left, as a experienced teacher of evolution, and what kind of changes when you began to teach it have you seen through the years that it has to keep kind of modifying because one thing they believe has been knocked right out of the water?
Evolution is a religion, and every time we come up with a scientific proof it's not true, they have to come up with a fairy tale for adults to counter it. Well, they've come up with so many fairy tales for adults now that it's become ludicrous. And while in schools you're still going to hear about the Big Bang, the fact of the matter is, and I have an article on my website that anybody can read for free.
And we have the website up a lot.
Thank you very much. But on that free article, I quote evolutionists where they have proved that the Big Bang never happened. And what has happened is many evolutionists, even at the highest levels, have abandoned the Big Bang. Now remember, the Big Bang was to be an excuse for why we have everything around us. The evolutionary religion requires infinite, eternal mass, energy, time. And the God of random chance. It's a religion. They have a God, the God of random chance. However, when everybody realized that the laws of thermodynamics, which are scientific laws, disprove evolution, they said, well, the laws of thermodynamics prove it's not eternal. Therefore, we have to come up with something else. So they came up with the Big Bang only about 100 years ago.
Okay, but did you encounter any of those? I'm almost out of time, that's why I'm hurrying. Did you encounter those when you were teaching and you had to kind of adjust?
Well, I never bought into the Big Bang to begin with, you know, for various obvious and logical reasons. When was the last time you saw an explosion construct a building?
Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah. Well, I became a creationist when I asked myself the question, could the law of gravity ever evolve?
That is so good.
You know, and if you ask yourself,
it couldn't evolve halfway.
Well, that's just it. Gravity could never have been less than it is. It's the universal force holding the universe together, and therefore it had to be created whole and complete. And then you realize the same thing is true of all laws. With the Big Bang, they said, okay, we know the laws of science disprove eternal, infinite mass, time, etc. So they came up with the Big Bang 100 years ago. Then they modified it about 6 times. And they came up with the current idea.
Which is?
Which is that all the mass in the universe was in a thimble and then exploded.
Well, that's right, yeah.
You know.
Dawkins kind of said that.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is they've now disproved it. They have disproved it. Not we. They disproved it. And I've got the information on my website. And so what have they done? Because they have no alternative, they've gone back to saying, well, it's just eternal.
Yeah.
Because the Big Bang had to have so many Band-Aids, you couldn't support it. They invented dark energy, dark mass, to try to correct the fact that there's only 10% of the mass in the universe there ought to be if they were right. And so what happened? I talk about dark mass, dark energy being the products of dark minds. You know, it's just and the Band-Aids got to the point where even evolutionists said we can no longer support it, and now they're going back to, well, it's just eternal.
They have to keep adjusting. I can't tell you how good it is to have you back.
Thank you. It's a joy and a pleasure.
It's an exhaustless study.
It is.
But thank you so much. I hope you got the website, and please stay with me. I have a couple things to say before we have to say goodbye.
Arthelene would like you to keep the following information handy. You may contact Homekeepers by writing to Homekeepers, P.O. Box 6922, Clearwater, Florida 33758, or go to www.rippy.org. Remember, we always enjoy hearing from our viewers, and we thank you for your support.
Boy, this has been informative, and there's so much more. That's why I would hope you would order this book, Creation, Our Worldview, for that gift of $25. I think this is something you grandparents could go over with your grandchildren. So important, and I'm afraid the church is really losing the message. We need a whole lot more information on creation and the fact that in the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. And then all through the scripture, you'll find a lot of information on creation in the book of Job, where God asked him a bunch of questions like, who are you? Where were you when I did this, this, and this? And then it's being proven. Every once in a while, something comes up that just proves the truth of the Bible. It's been a few years ago I read that, yes, the Jericho walls really did fall down. They really did. They've proven that. And more recently, I've read where they've found chariot parts, you know, pieces of the way they used to travel in the bottom of the Red Sea. So God's word is true. The evolutionists are the ones who have to continue tweaking their message. God's word is true from beginning to end. And we are out of time. So join me next time, remembering no higher calling than that of a homekeeper. God bless you.
If you should miss a Homekeepers program, you can catch up by going to www.ctnonline.com. Click on CTN Programs and then on Homekeepers.